and welcome to This is Ibrox. My name's Tommy McIntyre and I am joined for the second time, so 2 in a row, I don't know if that makes it a series or not, by football finance expert and all-round price of football podcast guru, and you can pay me for that later, Kieran Maguire. Kieran, absolute pleasure to see you again.
Well, thanks for the invite, Tommy. Looking forward to this. Should be fun.
Well, fun in italics because I don't know if it's ever fun when Rangers publish their accounts. I think it should be a national holiday in Scotland because everything seems to grind to a halt and everybody gets interested in it. Primarily people from other clubs. It's a very strange scenario. So you've got St Andrew's Day, you've got Christmas, you've got Diwali and stuff like that, and then you've got Rangers Accounts Day, and that's it's the big one here. So I know you are on top of all of these things for clubs in the UK, and I suppose the headline act right off the bat is. See, I'm just glossing over the COVID thing anymore in terms of asking people how they're doing. It's just part of the landscape now. All niceties are out the window, Kieran. But the main headline is Rangers posted a 15.9 million loss in the year ended to 30th of June. Now that's always the first thing that people look at when a club puts their books out. You know, what's the profit, what the loss is, and that's a scary number for a club in Scotland given the market that we're operating in. But I'm interested in your take here. There's a real story within those numbers, which I'm sure we'll get to. What's your outside take from the books in totality?
Clearly, the losses are not something you want forever. But if you look at some of the clubs south of the border, they would be more than happy with a loss of that magnitude. If Rangers want to progress, and I think progression means winning the Premiership, qualifying for the Champions League, getting into the group stages there, then they need to invest in talent. And talent comes in the form of the management team and the playing team. And in football, talent isn't cheap. So those losses are very much driven by the fact that the wage bill has gone up considerably. They have invested money in players. And that means short-term pain. And that pain presently is being borne by the investors, by the directors who are putting money into the club. Banks won't touch football clubs at present because they are high risk. The last thing you want to do is to be a bank manager. And I speak to people who work in the banking sector, and I say, why are you so reluctant to lend to football? And the bank manager turned around to me and says, well, if the club starts to struggle and it potentially I had to go and pull the rug on the overdraft, I've got all the fans weaponized against my bank. Now, especially if I'm working in that city, if my kids are in that city, and this actually refers to a chat I had with a club which is in the English Championship. Where the club, I could see that there were issues. I happen to know I'd actually done an investigation and had a word with somebody, and he said, "Well, we are getting out of football for this particular reason." So the funding has come from a variety of sources as far as Rangers are concerned, and that's fine. Any business that is growing, and I think Rangers are in a growth phase still at present because they have had setbacks over the last decade. We can't ignore those, and they had to have a financial reset and grow from there. Now, what we have is, after a period of cautious lending and cautious investment, we now have the brakes slightly off. We've got new people coming in who want to see Rangers progress. And in order to do that, they're putting the money where their mouth is.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard for me to look back at that financial reset, obviously, given everything we've lived through. But you're absolutely right. It's something that Rangers fans, by and large, are extremely, extremely literate about the financial position of the club and extremely, extremely interested. And we're always looking for that. And I'm just interested then, just to move the conversation a little bit. In terms of, you touched on, I was going to leave this to the end, but you touched on the investors that are coming in. So we've seen recently Stuart Gibson putting $5 million in. That's Stuart Gibson, who's a co-founder of ESR out in China and in the Far East in terms of commercial property. We saw Julian Woolhart joined the board as well from Deacon Capital Partners, DCP, who also sponsor the women's team. And we've got Douglas Park, John Bennett, etc. in the background. The Rangers have been quite clear in their articulation of a going concern, which is a phrase I think is a bit mythologised sometimes when people come to look at books and organisations anyway. And they've pointed out they need circa 9 million, so 8.8 million to see us through to the end of the 2021 season, and then a further 14.4 million in 21-22. Now, I've seen a lot of people speak of FFP, financial fair play, and I'm quite certain, although happy for you to challenge me, I'm quite certain that we're not into those realms, given the actual layout of financial fair play. But what's your feeling from the outside? And I sense that player trading will come up highly on this, but obviously that's an unsustainable area. Do you think that even with the impact of the pandemic, the 21-22 season will be the last season that there's an expectation to see that amount of money going into the books from investors?
Yes, I think what the board will have done and what the investors will have done is have discussions and to have set themselves medium-term goals. And those medium-term goals are to make progress in Europe, because Europe is where the money is as far as Scottish football is concerned. The size of the TV deal is never going to be great in terms of domestic revenues. So Scotland is a reasonably sized market. I was looking at the numbers for a variety of European countries. I'm actually researching an update from my book, and Rangers is sort of broadly in sort of the Norway to Sweden market in terms of TV monies, which is fine. But if Rangers fans want to see the club progress in Europe, to get to the final stages, and also, of course, I think the elephant in the room is Champions League, because the way that UEFA operates is that for every £1 of prize money that's available in the Europa League, there's £4 in the Champions League. If you qualify for the group stages of the Champions League, you're effectively looking at around about £30 million coming in terms of broadcast income. Now, if you take a look at Rangers' figures for 2020, they had 13 million coming in from both their European adventures and the domestic cups and leagues as well. So qualifying for the Champions League and getting to those group stages, and even if you don't do particularly well, you've still got a major income benefit. And once you've got that once, that gives the management team the resources to go into the transfer market, to continue to invest in the squad, and it becomes a virtuous circle. So I suspect that is the goal of the investors. And once that happens, that should allow them the ability to say, right, well, we've put in our seed capital. We put in, and that seed capital has helped the club to grow, and now to a large extent it's self-sufficient. So clearly we can't ignore the impact of COVID-19. That has been a restraint for all football clubs. But assuming that we've had success in terms of the vaccine, a success for Rangers in 2021 and 2022, I think they could then be effectively able to wash their own face, in the sense that they wouldn't continually need external funding from the board or from third-party investors.
Very, very interesting. And I'll take a small pause, because there's probably two things I want to speak to out of the books, which is one, I think it's quite interesting. You might want to give the background of why you're wearing that Dutch shirt, because I was quite interested as well. It was a gift, yeah?
It was, yes. I was doing some work for the KNVB, the Dutch Football Association recently. They asked me to go and give a talk on how to come out of the pandemic, to look for alternative sources of income, cost control, things of this nature. So they'd originally invited me across to Amsterdam a few months ago, but sadly, as a result of COVID, I had to give it via Zoom, which is a shame in so many ways. First of all, it's always nice to talk face to face, and secondly, for a variety of reasons, and I think men of a certain age will understand this, Amsterdam's my favourite city in the whole world, but not that I can remember ever going there, and that's why it's my favourite city in the whole world. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Dutch football, and I think the success of clubs such as Ajax. And the fact that they have regularly done so well in the Champions League, I think that can, to a certain extent, set a template for a club such as Rangers. They have the big stadium. They have a very committed and loyal fan base. So therefore they have a brand. Ajax has a brand which I think is fairly universally known. And then they can leverage on that and try to build up international revenues and things of this nature. So I understand that the colour orange is popular amongst Rangers fans, and I'm a Dutch fan, so I thought it's an olive branch to everyone.
There we go. Price of Loyal Rangers Supporters Club. There we go. I'm just, fine well, I'm going to edit that together so that it stops at you saying invited to Amsterdam, KNVB to help come out. And I'm just going to leave it as your coming out video there, Kieran. So thank you very much for that exclusive. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think I'm going to tell my wife first.
Yeah, that's probably what we'll hold off production on that one. But I also wanted to touch on, I was going to wait to the end, but you'd mentioned it there, and I think it's really important given the charitable nature as well. The update to the book.
Well, I wrote this book for my students a year ago. It took me a long time to write it. And as a result of COVID, I was quite shocked to see the number of people who are in financial distress and other distress. And I do think it's a scandal in this country that we've got people who can't feed themselves. So I've written a book called The Price of Football. It's not designed for people who work in finance. It's finance for non-finance, football finance for non-financial people. It's sold quite well. 100% of the royalties this year are going to the Trussell Trust, which is a food bank charity, and they've invited me down to see their local operations. And it's one of those things you come out, and I'm not making myself out to be soft here, and I came out and I was in tears. I was so impressed with the work that they did, and myself and my wife both invited down. But they are non-judgmental. It doesn't matter whether you've got a Porsche in your drive or whether you've got a bicycle. Some people are being hit by this horrendous disease, and they are unable to feed themselves through no fault of their own. So it's a really good organisation. I'm not Marcus Rashford. I'm not able to call on a market of millions, but we took the view. I had a chat with my wife. We said, well, I've never received a royalty check, so therefore I'd never miss it. And probably if I had kept the royalties for myself, I'd have just spent most of it on cocaine and hookers and wasted the rest.
Well, at least the KNVB will hear of that as well. That's a filler for the Amsterdam trip. I would implore any listeners to buy the book. I've read it. I bought it myself. I've had a read of it. You're absolutely right. It distills the messages really clearly for non-financial people as well. And now you know the background of it, that all the money's going to a really, really important and good place. So if you can, particularly with Christmas just around the corner, get onto Amazon or your local bookstore, preferably your local bookstore, and support local businesses and purchase that book. So if I just jump back to Rangers then, because we touched on a couple of things just before we started speaking about Amsterdam and the book and stuff like that. And I'm quite interested that Rangers have had a lot, and there's been a lot of noise, and I've been involved in some of the conversations with people like Castor and all that as well for This Is Ibrox as part of their fan reach out. And we'd previously had the Elite Hummel deal as well. And the books mention, I think it's a 3.3 million input from the retail deal, but that was some attachment to Mike Ashley as that as well. I'm just wondering how big an impact, given that you've just spoken about TV revenue, which is the single biggest driver, and then you've got other things like match the income and how big an impact that is going to have with this refreshed Castor deal for Rangers?
Well, I think there's a variety of positives here. First of all, it's clear. I'm an outsider, so I don't understand the intricacies. Mike Ashley isn't a popular man in Glasgow. He's not a popular man in Newcastle. He's not a popular man in practically anybody that he deals with. But he is successful, and he's expensive. If he gets his hands into your business, then there's going to be financial consequences. It looks as if sort of analysing the commercial income, that the Rangers fans have downed tools to a certain extent because of Mike Ashley's involvement. There's been, from what I see on social media, there's been the impact of the boycott. So I think the Castore deal, it's an opportunity for a clean break. I know that there have been quality control issues that Rangers have raised. I think by now that those have been addressed, and that they will be proud to wear the shirt because they feel it's no longer tainted with the hands of Mike Ashley, and they don't like the idea of Ashley having any of the sale proceeds of their shirt. So I think those are steps forwards. Rangers is a club with an opportunity to extend its influence, and I do think the potential now that some of the investors are based in the Far East, the things such as pre-season tours there. I don't know enough details here, but I've seen with Wolverhampton Wanderers here in the south of the border. But what they've done is that they've gone heavily into esports because they've got Chinese investors, and esports is huge in China. So if Castore with esports plus Rangers, I think that could be quite good. The fact that it's a disruptor brand, I think will help Rangers as well, because they want to be a disruptive club. They want to be slightly different, not using the Adidas, Nike, Puma sort of oligopoly that we have. So that can work in their favour. I suspect that they will be Castore's leading retail product, which means that they are in a strong place when it comes to negotiation. If you are dealing with Nike or Adidas, they are very good in the sense that they've got very good logistics, very good distribution networks. But we all know that it's Barcelona, Manchester United, Liverpool, PSG, who are their main concerns. And if you are their 14th biggest seller, you're going to get the 14th best service from them. With Castore, it's completely different. It's essential for Castore's growth and success that Rangers products are quality, well made, well designed, look good. All of these can roll in together. So I think there's opportunities for growth in that particular area for the club. I mean, last year, commercial income was down around about 5% overall, given that the season effectively finished traditionally in March. So therefore, there were fixtures lost. That's actually pretty good. I mean, all of the numbers, in my view, in terms of revenue, were exceeded my expectations.
Well, that's always a pleasing thing to hear, and it's interesting you mentioned Wolseley as well, who I believe Castore have just replaced Adidas as their kit supplier. So that disruptor brand entering the English market and a bit more, and I think Saracens in rugby as well. I might as well complete the list there. I think the West Indies cricket team are already Castore. But just to drill into that for a second, the Far East connection, because like I said, we've cycled through Stuart Gibson and Julian Wolhart and stuff like that. It seems to me that by and large you've got North America, India, then the Far East, and by the Far East I'm not being homogenous there, I'm saying particularly mainland China are probably the last big untapped markets in terms of where Rangers could get into and grow some serious income. And we've already got a tie-up with a Indian club, Bengaluru FC, and we've got a tie-up with Orange County Soccer as well in America, mainland Northern America, I should say, before anybody questions my geography understanding there. And I'm just wondering, do you think that that's probably a bit of and I appreciate you're not in the detail here, but I think that would be a bit of a strategic step for Rangers to then eventually have some sort of Chinese club tie-up there to try and break into that market a little bit easier?
Yes, I think that would be ideal, and we have seen the success of the Manchester City model, the multi-club model, which is really paying dividends. The investment that Manchester City have now had from external sources, because they are seen as being able to extend the influence, the brand, the reputation. And it gives you a start point for growth in China. China is not an easy market to be successful in. There's always protocols to observe. There are local issues that you have to satisfy. So having an involvement with a Chinese club that's already aware of what's required and would give Rangers the opportunity to do pre-season tours, things of that nature, to perhaps open a Rangers store. We've seen Manchester United open theme parks in China. So I think that would be a step forwards. And it would also take into consideration that domestically, whilst Rangers have huge amounts of support in Scotland, there is a ceiling on what can be achieved. You can only play the number of games that take place in the SPFL. You've got a stadium which is packed out every week, regardless of the opponents. That's great. That's absolutely superb. But how can you grow your match day influence? Well, if the fans, you can't get more fans coming to Ibrox to make money, can we get Rangers going somewhere else to make that money as an alternative? So, I think the involvement with the Far East is something which is intriguing. It's got to be handled correctly, because you won't get a second chance if it's messed up. I think the Chinese government and the Chinese authorities tend to be quite sensitive, so we've got to get this right from a Rangers perspective. But I think it will be interesting if they use their existing links there to progress the club.
Yeah, it'll be an exciting market to tap into, and I'm sure the club have no doubt looked at that as well. So, just a couple of maybe final points there. So we know that the revenue's increased 11%. These are relatively, I agree with you. I think they're pretty positive books, actually, considering where Rangers knew where they were and what's been cycled through and some of the legacy issues in terms of the retail deals, etc. But I'm just thinking, in terms of the player trading aspect. So it's been a while, I suppose, since Rangers, let's say, grew their own and then cashed in. Somebody coming up through the youth ranks or anything like that. And that has to be part of the business model. I think the board have been relatively clear on that. And we've spent a lot of money, well, relatively a large amount of money in terms of building the squad that we currently have, which have some really good assets in it. I'm thinking James Tavernier, Joe Aribo, Ayas Haji, obviously Alfredo Morelos, and Kemar Roof as well, possibly. Now, I think something like since the 30th of June, there's been another 15 million in squad investment. There's been 4.5 million loans, etc. as well. But do you think that the player trading aspect absolutely has to come to the fore? And do you think the Rangers will be in? Now, they knocked back a £16 million confirmed bid for Alfredo Morelos in the end of the transfer window, and that was confirmed by Lille, the Lille chairman. Do you think that were these figures to continue, Rangers would, or they should be looking at cashing in on some assets in the next transfer window?
I'm not, from a financial necessity point of view, I don't think that they have to do that. I think it would be a case of whether the management team feel that selling a player for a good fee, it sends out a signal. And I know it's sort of the elephant in the room. If you take a look at the Celtic model, which has been very successful, signing players within a particular frame, in a particular market itself, developing those players and then selling them for a multiple. Rangers are now recruiting in that same pool, and therefore they would, in my view, have the opportunity. And again, I don't know enough about how well players are progressing. You're the experts here at Ibrox. I'm just, I watch Sky, so and you pick up bits and pieces, but not huge amounts. I think that any club that is, we have to be honest here, Rangers from a European perspective are mid-tier. Yeah, that's the most that they can hope for. They are not going to break into the elite of Real, Bayern. You know, we know what I think a reasonable target, but there's no reason why. I think Ajax are a perfect example of something that Rangers should aspire to be in terms of getting into the Champions League, progressing into the Champions League, developing players, selling them on at a profit. And reinvesting that money, because that's going to help them domestically. And I appreciate how important things are from a domestic perspective, but also that money can then go on to help them to be regular features within the Champions League. So that would involve player sales, and selling players isn't a problem. It generates money. It also helps you to recruit players, because if they see that there is a pathway, and every player wants to go to wherever it's going to be, I think a classic example would be somebody like Tierney moving on to Arsenal, from Celtic, profit made for the club. The player gets the substantial pay rise, gets the opportunity to play in another league and so on. And if you can therefore go to players that you are recruiting and say, well, look, we signed Alfredo Morelos. Was it from Finland or somewhere strange?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. Yeah. So playing for HJK, thinking.
Yeah, so you can go to players who you think have got potential, and you can say, we are Rangers. We want you to play for you, but we will never stand in your way. And here's an example. Alfredo went from us. He's now, we signed him. He's made a profit. He's made money. He's now playing in another league within Europe, successfully appearing in the Champions League, whatever it's going to be. And that's part of the sales pitch. So it can actually work in your favour. Clubs lose money in practically all leagues. And the way that they can offset those losses is twofold. First of all, it's going to the owners and constantly saying, can you empty out your pockets for every bit of cash? Or you do it through a player trading model. And we've got clubs here in England that people don't realise that what nobody knows south of the border, that the club that has sold players for the most money in each of the last 5 seasons is Chelsea. And I go, well, no, because all they see is Chelsea buying players. But what Chelsea do is they buy and they trade, and they've got 40 players out on loan, and some of those deals become and you've only got to go and sell 5 or 6 players for 1 million, 3 million, and so on that nobody's ever heard of, and you've got a nice sort of additional income source. And I think within Scotland, where, as I say, you've got this natural ceiling in terms of broadcasting revenues, broadcast money last season, £13 million. You compare that to the bottom of the Premier League, which is bringing in 90 to 95. If anybody said which is the bigger club, Bournemouth or Rangers, well, 100 people are going to say Rangers. So it is a frustration. But it's not something which the club itself is able to address. I mean, the only thing that they could ever possibly hope to do is at some point in future, if there's the opportunity to sell their own TV rights, and then that could be a game changer. Would it be a huge game changer? No, but it certainly, I think, would be a positive one, because, again, we have to be honest, who drives TV viewing audiences? It's 2 clubs in Scotland.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to disagree with that point. I think it's completely spot on, and if we could actually get to sell those rights ourselves, in particular the ability to get them into those other markets that we spoke about in terms of China and India, and Rangers had signed a deal to represent Scottish football in the Indian subcontinent as well fairly recently. So maybe that's part of that structure coming together that you were mentioning there. I'm just very interested as well. So wages were up a quarter in these books as well to, I think, circa 43 million. Now, given revenue was 59, in terms of what Rangers are cycling through, where do you think the tipping point is there, or where's the ceiling? Where's the comfortable ceiling? Stretch ceiling when it comes to the ratio that Rangers, a Scottish club, but Rangers in particular, should be looking at in terms of spend on the and I'm going to take amortization out of it because I know that's maybe one of your favourite subjects. But in terms of when does that start to become moving from the black to the red dial, so to speak?
Well, UEFA have a red flag at 70%. Now, Rangers last season was 73, but it was 73 in a COVID environment. I think that had COVID not happened, there wouldn't have been much of an upward tick on wages. Clearly, there would have been additional costs because you'd have extra match day costs and so on. But there would have been a significant upwards tick in terms of revenue because they would have got more match day. They potentially they may have had to give a refund in terms of TV deals coming from both UEFA and domestically and things of this nature. So had COVID not taken place, I'm reasonably confident that Rangers would have been below the 70% line. And if you take a look at the last 5 seasons, I've got 59, 60, 2018 went up to 74%, but I think that was the year that Steven Gerrard arrived.
Yeah,
is that right? 2017-18. So I would have expected that because you had a new manager. The board decided to back the manager that season, and therefore a one-off. It was a little bit high, but not nastily. I've got clubs in the English Championship, but spending £226 on wages for every £100 of income, and nobody bats an eyelid. So I wouldn't get too concerned about that. I'd be looking sort of, what's your sort of 3 or 4 year trend? You're around about where I think you ought to be. I don't think there's a lot of scope to significantly increase wages unless you can increase income. And how can you increase income? Yeah, we've had this discussion. Win the Premiership, get into the Champions League, get into those group stages, and that's an extra, realistically, that's an extra 15 to 20 million pounds minimum. You get through you get some good results in the group stages. I think it's around about 2.7 million pounds per victory in Champions League. So that's phenomenal. And once you get into that, then again, that you can go back to the manager and say, well done, you helped achieve that. Here's a few extra million to play with this year in terms of either rewarding existing players in terms of contracts, or we can now go and spend, perhaps we were trying to sign 3 players, we can now afford to sign 4.
Yeah, and I get that uptick of the 2018 and injection of Steven Gerrard into the club would be a big driver of people being interested. Also, what you're saying there is probably brings back into focus the Europa League income, which has been incredibly important in Rangers, getting into those group stages as well. And I think there's something circa 9 million in prize money that they were able to generate from that Europa League run as well. So I suppose that the final question for me, and I'm actually going to be a man of my word this time and say, because I remember the last interview we did where I think I said final question from me 3 times. So I do mean it on this occasion. So I suppose that the final question though is, and it's probably the one that's driving most Rangers fans, or exercising most Rangers fans, is these are pretty decent books in my opinion, and there's a stable cabal of directors who are willing to go to the well, and that's already been pre-agreed. Given we're cycling out of the back of the pandemic though, I'm quite interested on, do you think that the figures in the next set of books will look significantly different from these ones, or do you think they should be relatively on a par? And I appreciate I'm asking that question with 2 hands over your eyes because nobody can tell the future of the pandemic. But yeah, I'm just interested in your opinion there, if nothing else.
Okay, my view would be that income will probably take a dip because I think we've got to be realistic, and the chances of getting full crowds back to see football this season is close to 0. If we get some, then it's a bonus. So that is going to be negative. Rangers, realistically, they've qualified now for the knockout phases of the Europa League. That's a positive, and then we're moving into an area where every match actually is very important from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah, and hopefully we can replicate that knockout stages again this season as well. So, again, I suppose the final comment though is to say, well, thank you. Obviously, see, I've couched that in different terms, but thank you. But also, where can people find you? Where can they find The Price of Football? How do they access what is a phenomenally excellent listening podcast?
Well, I do this Price of Football podcast with stand-up comedian Kevin Day. We do that twice a week. We started off doing 20 minutes once a week, and now we're doing 2 hours of content, mainly because there are so many disaster stories in the world of football and finance. So we do a Thursday show, which is sort of a news show. We do I was about to call it a Reader's Wives Sunday show, but no, sorry, listeners' questions.
That needs to be
So we do a listeners' questions show on a Sunday, which goes out on a Monday. We've actually got 250 questions which we've not yet answered. You know, when we started, we thought, well, no, who's going to be asking questions about football finance? The show has surpassed expectations. You can find me on Twitter, and I do run the Price of Football website as well, which I try to update as often as I can. But with the podcast, I've done over 800 interviews this year on football finance for TV, radio, and newspapers, and guys such as yourself, partly due to the pandemic. And so, trying to find time to update the website is a challenge. And I've been divorced once. I can't afford another one, so I'm under a lot of pressure to not spend all of my time nerding out on that. But that's where you can find me.
Well, I think that's a fairly robust way to end this this interview. Kieran, once again, thank you so much for joining me. I very much appreciate it.
Well, thanks, and good luck to everybody at This Is Ibrox.
Like an animal, something so physical.